So my unit ends up being deployed. I'm with the 507 Maintenance Company, 11th Brigade out of Fort Bliss, ADA. February of 2003, so only 1 year of actual active duty service. And we find ourselves sitting in Kuwait. At that point, my commander and my first sergeant were taken from us, and we were given acting commander and first sergeant. By March 20th of 2003, when President Bush officially declared war, we were told just to follow along with the rest of the convoy that was headed north to Baghdad. By March 22nd, so 2 days of being in Iraq, and my unit starts to fall behind. So my acting commander and first sergeant make the decision that he's going to split us up. So he keeps 31 of us and 16 vehicles behind and pushes the rest of the convoy on with the rest of the larger convoy. We no longer had communication. Our GPSs quit working, our handheld radio devices, nothing like that was working with us. All of the bases and everything were, at this, 19 hours ahead with the rest of that convoy. So that is how far the 16 vehicles, the 31 of us, fell behind. By the morning of March 23rd, so 3 days of being in Iraq, and we think that we see the rest of the convoy ahead of us. So we start toward that, and we actually end up finding Hardtop Road. We're excited about that. We think that we're getting close. As we approach the lights, we notice that it was not the convoy, but it was the city to Nasiriyah. The paper maps that the vehicles were given, my commander and first sergeant unfortunately read those incorrectly. So I'm not blaming and putting blame on anybody, but as you can tell, there was a leadership failure. As we were doing so, most of the Iraqis came outside of their homes. Some of them were standing up on the rooftops, some of them were standing out in the open. I mean, anywhere that they could get aim at us is where they went. And unfortunately, again, an entire town versus the 33 of us at this point. They started to bomb us, AK-47, anything that they could, they were attacking us. So this was a 4-person Humvee. I was the smallest at the time, so I jumped into kind of the middle section, which was kind of the transmission hump, just to make way and get everybody in there. So not in a seat, we are traveling as fast as we could, started to shoot back, and we realized that out of, Lori had an M16, I had an M16, my first sergeant had an M16 and an M9, and then the two that were sitting beside me had M249s. The only 2 working weapons out of all of those came from the 2 guys that were sitting beside me. So as we are traveling as fast as we can to get out of this point, we were hit by a rocket-propelled grenade, an RPG, and it struck the right side of our vehicle. Lori ended up losing control of the vehicle, and we ended up slamming into the back of a 18-wheeler, the trailer portion. The driver was shot and killed of the tractor and trailer, and the female passenger, which was Shoshana Johnson from El Paso, was later ended up as a prisoner of war as well. But for us in the Humvee, Lori ended up hitting her head off of the steering wheel, ended up later dying of head trauma. The 3 men that were with me were all shot and killed. For me, I was knocked unconscious at some point during the convoy. We're not exactly sure how or when, since I was the only survivor in the vehicle. But when the firefight, the ambush, came to a closure, the Iraqis came around to determine who was KIA and who was still alive, and they noticed that I was still alive but unconscious. So they actually ended up jerking my body out of the Humvee and dragging me across the road to one of Saddam's palaces that was nearby. Once inside of there, they ended up snapping and breaking my right humerus, and my back was broken at the 4th and 5th lumbar. My left femur was crushed. My left tibia was smashed by a metal pipe object, and then my right foot was completely crushed and turned backwards. So after that, they ended up taking me to Saddam General there in Nasiriyah. At that point, again, I'm still unconscious, and they take me down to the operating room, remove my femur bone out of my leg, and they replace it with a 1940s era rod that was fit for a man and unsterilized. So they, after that, they took me back upstairs, and I awake and I look up to see these Iraqi men standing over top of me. So I'm lying on a bed, and the first thing that I tried to do was, jump to get away from them, because I instantly knew that I was not with my comrades. I had no idea who these Iraqi men were. I didn't know my surroundings. And at that point, as I tried to jump back, I realized that I can't move or feel anything from my waist down. So I think that I'm paralyzed. Then, it was a couple days later, they moved me around the hospital quite a bit to kind of keep me hidden. And they take me back down to the operating room. And this time, I'm fully awake, I'm alert, I know what's happening, I know what's going on. And as I am being taken down there, and they transport me over onto the operating room table, I look up, I see the bright shining light already turned on, and one of the Iraqis they brought in could speak somewhat of a broken English, so I could understand bits and pieces of what he was saying, but we just couldn't communicate that well. But I remember him telling me that I needed to put the oxygen mask over my face. And as he's trying to put it on there, I start, just kind of jerking and saying no. And I start just begging and pleading with them to please stop, that whatever it is that they're about to do, just please stop and return me to the Americans. They look at me, and he tells me, we have to amputate your leg. And I start crying again, because I don't even know what's wrong. I have absolutely no idea what's wrong with my leg. Again, they're not saying anything, they're not communicating. For whatever reason, they stop, and they put me back over onto the little gurney, carry me back upstairs, put me back in the room that I was originally in, and from that point, again, they moved me around the hospital until one day they loaded me up into an ambulance and told me that they were going to take me to an American checkpoint. And we never make it to an American checkpoint. Where we ended up was on the outskirts of the town where the electricity had already been shut off. They took me to an abandoned building on the outskirts, and they put me in there and just left. And I remember watching, between a crack in the door, the sun go up and the sun go down, and I'm thinking, this is it for me. I have two options here. I can scream and make as much noise as I humanly can in hopes that there would be some kind of American force on the outside of that building. Or I could lay there in silence and do nothing, because my fear was, what happens if I get in the hands of the Fedayeen or the militiamen? And those were the hands that I did not want in. So I chose to just lay there in silence. Eventually, those same Iraqis, they came back, they got me, took me back to the hospital. And again, it was a constant moving me around. And at one point, I could hear helicopters and Humvees and the tanks and bombs exploding in the background and gunshots. And there were 2 Iraqi men that were inside of the room with me that day, and one of them locked the door. The other one stood by the window, and he just kept pacing and looked very antsy and nervous, and I knew something was happening. I just had no idea what was about to occur. To me, as I could hear all of these American vehicles roll through, I'm thinking that they're there to overtake the building, to bomb it, to secure it, whatever they have to do, not knowing that I was inside. And the next thing that I know, outside of the room that I was in, down the hall, I could hear them yelling and asking, "Where is Private Lynch?" And at first I could hear my name, so I got kind of excited, and then I got nervous, and then I got scared, because I'm thinking, okay, yep, they're after me, but are they Iraqis after me? The next thing I knew, standing beside my bed was a PJ, so go Air Force. That'll be the only time I say that. No, I love all forces because, or all branches, because of, everyone was involved. But I do remember the PJ in particular standing next to me, because he was the first one that came in contact with me, and he looked at me and he said, "We're Americans and we're here to take you home." And as corny as it sounds, I just remember looking up at him and saying, "Yeah, I'm an American soldier too." So he ripped the American flag off of his uniform, which I'm sure he probably got yelled at for doing that, but he ripped the American flag off of his uniform and placed it within my left hand, and he said, we're getting out of here.